And it finally happened. After years of resistance from the industry and honestly their own customers, Apple finally relented and put USB-C into their smartphones. Or were they just forced by the EU through their regulations? Whatever the intent or the actual purpose of this change might be, this is a monumental shift in the industry, a long awaited one at that. And together with the announcement of Thunderbolt 5, there's come some interesting questions about the future of USB C. Is this the end of the line? Is this the end game for the universal standard to rule them all? Or is there another shift that's coming within the next few years that could potentially disrupt everything all over again? Now, I promise you, this is not going to be a very long video because I don't actually have a script. And this is mostly going to be just speculation about what is currently going on inside of the honestly mess that is the consumer electronics and technology industry scene. But from my perspective, the adoption of USB-C for iPhones is going to be the unifying force for all mobile devices going forward. USB-C is already the predominant standard, if not the standard, of almost all newly released Android phones. And with iPhone going the way of USB-C, there's going to be even less of those older standards that are going to be out there. Of course, the amount of Lightning devices that have been produced since the last generation will continue to exist because let's face it, longevity is Apple's strong point. But new devices going forward are all going to be USB-C, and along with the adoption of the entire computer industry at this point, laptops, desktops, all of those devices now have USB-C, at the very least as an option. It seems that USB-C is now set to completely lock down the entire industry into one universal standard, just like how the European Union had envisioned it. However, I think there seems to be some sort of instability that will go on before that entire consolidation takes place. And I'm going to go back to those devices that still use Lightning. The iPhone 14 and all the iPhones previously, right? Because, as I said, given Apple's track record of having phones that really last a long time with their values intact, uh, I think it's fairly safe to assume that Lightning will not just completely disappear, right? There is going to be a transition time wherein both USB-C and Lightning Apple devices are going to be sold alongside each other, and where complete USB-C adoption over the iPhone market is going to be relatively slow at best. It's going to be much slower than what many tech YouTubers, tech enthusiasts are probably hoping for, right? And second is that the adoption of USB-C will not necessarily mean the adoption of fast standards, right? The USB 3 point whatever gen whatever of the world, or Thunderbolt even. Because when you look at it, the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus are going to be using still USB 2 speeds, while the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max are going to be using USB 3 speeds. Those latter two are going to be just catching up to other flagship devices, while the last two are actually going to be in the same ballpark as a lot of mid-range phones. My phone, for example, is still stuck using USB 2.0, which is bonkers to consider when you think about how much potential USB-C has on data transfer. Especially with the announcement of Thunderbolt 5, which can go up to, according to Intel, 100 gigabit per second. That is an extremely fast speed that it's hard to comprehend on modern mobile devices. Even laptops, I don't think will need that sort of capability anytime soon, unless we want to output true 8K from laptops that, as of right now, can't even properly run 4K devices at the frame rates that many people are accustomed to, right? But that's mostly the side of gamers. What this allows us is fast data transfers, not just for displays, but also for peripherals. But again, the demand doesn't exist as of right now. If you consider how fast the current solid state drives have been, even with NVMe, even with all PCI Gen 5, barring some serious technological innovations or a complete rethinking of our storage paradigm, 100 gigabit per second is going to be completely unused for a long time. And in the only cases where it's going to be used are going to be very niche at best. Let's start with one that is currently on the top of my head. External graphics cards. Now that is going to be a huge benefit for the PC, right? For laptops to be able to use 100 gigabits per second of data to transfer graphics output back and forth between the CPU inside of a laptop, and an external graphics card to combine the power of both is going to be huge and will completely change, I think, the way that graphics cards are currently connected to, right? XG Mobile Connect, or whatever the current standard that Asus uses, for example, will be completely obsoleted by Thunderbolt 5 the moment that it becomes mainstream. But again, the use case is a little bit shaky at best. And it seems to me like this is more innovation for the sake of innovation rather than an innovation addressing a need, because even external graphics cards are going to be bottlenecked by things that are not just the connection between it and the CPU. The mobile CPU itself is going to be a complete bottleneck. When you consider how still relatively puny their performance is compared to actual desktops, right? The cooling capacities, thermodynamics isn't going to be changing anytime soon, and it's just reality that these tiny laptops are going to perform less than appropriately cooled PCs for a long time. That's not changing even as we enter the era of Meteor Lake and Zen 5. And then when we go back to storage, well, as I said, there's going to be a need to change the entire storage paradigm moving forward, right? As of right now, internal connections for storage, like PCIe Gen 5, for example, tops out at about 64 gigabit per second, or is it gigabytes per second? Nevertheless, that is way slower than the theoretical maximum of Thunderbolt 5, which means that we will not be reaching that theoretical maximum, especially on mobile portable SSDs. And consider as well the current protocols that governs these portable standards, right? And how that will become a bottleneck to the sheer speeds that our connection highway now provides. That's not changing anytime soon, at least not without considerable effort that I don't think the consumer technology industry is going to put forward unless there's a huge demand. And as much as it pains me as a tech enthusiast to say this, there isn't a demand for such high speeds. And so USB-C is stuck in a state where technological advances are pushing it forwards, making it more future-proof. I mean, you're able to use 100 gigabits per second on 24 pins, right? But at the same time, the adoption of USB-C has been rather slow, and the demand for those high-speed devices are going to become more and more niche until the entire industry pulls up forward. I personally think, and might be like some sort of thing that won't age very well, that the consumer industry is going to be topping out at USB 4 speeds at most for the next decade. There isn't really a need for portable devices that can do more than 40 gigabit per second, at least for the mainstream. And sure, there are niche use cases, but the bottom line is there isn't much demand for the vast majority of people. And that's not even considering the fragmentation that's currently happening because of the way we're trying to reach ever higher speeds, right? You have to recall that the 100 gigabit per second theoretical maximum is only for Thunderbolt 5. This is not a USB protocol, this is Intel's protocol. And while they have made good on their promise to make Thunderbolt 3 accessible to everyone via USB 4, there's no guarantee that they will do that in Thunderbolt 5. And there is especially no guarantee that these new standards will be intercompatible with each other. That goes to say that the identity crisis of USB-C is going to continue and will only hamper its adoption and make it very confusing for a lot of people. I mean, consider going back to the iPhone 15. They have, all of four of them have the same ports, but they operate very differently from each other. One is significantly slower, like an order of magnitude or more slower than the premium ones. That is an insane discrepancy, and made even more insane by the fact that there is really nothing that technologically prevents them from putting USB 3 on the 15 and 15 Plus, which is just basically the same architecture as the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max. Just, it's just down to their preference, I guess. And this, to me, is the crux of USB-C adoption. It's great that almost everyone now has access to a port that literally almost anyone can use as well. It makes life a whole lot easier when you forget to bring back your charger or to bring your charger with you during travel times. You can just easily buy a new one or even borrow one from a colleague that's traveling with you. It's removed the hassle of having to bring so many cables around with you when you only really need one standard to rule them all. But it's going to be a while before this entire field will clean itself out and become much more uniform than it currently is. Fragmentation, as I said before, is killing the entire vibe of this adoption. And I think it's the greatest flaw in USB-C. It's a universal physical standard which can be used by other standards for their own benefits, right? This place is already a mess on USB-C. Charging as well, which I discussed in a while in an episode a few months ago, and data transfer, which is obviously also going to be a mess going forward. Just looking at the USB-C port, you cannot predict what kind of standards it has. You can make educated guesses and you can look at the spec sheets, but unless there is an actual organization that's regulating the use of USB-C in some way, this is going to be a problem moving forward. And hopefully consumers are becoming a little bit more adept to this and has become more critical of this over the years, because we don't want to be stuck in a world where companies can just market their products in whatever way they want and confusion reigns in, because technically the standard's what it is, but the expectations way outstrip the actual capacity. So yeah, this is probably, we're entering the end game of USB-C now, and with the adoption of USB-C in the iPhone, it's going to be the end of the resistance from other standards and consolidating USB-C as the one only standard for portable devices, and maybe soon even laptops, as well as dystopian as it is for a lot of users who still use USB-A. But we have to keep an eye on what these USB-C implementations are. There were rumors that Apple was going to be locking down USB-C, and thankfully that didn't really materialize. At least as of right now, their messaging says that it hasn't. It's a completely open standard, so at the very least, that didn't materialize. But there is a certain possibility that this open standard, incredibly designed as it is, will become like a confusing, confounding mess, even more so than it already is now. So rejoice, I guess, but also be aware that USB C is still not what it seems to be. It's still quite a bit of a mess to navigate from, and you should always look at the spec sheets and read up on reviews whenever you try to, I guess, connect a port, a USB-C port, to another device, just so your expectations don't get wasted.